You are not stuck because you lack discipline. You are not stuck because you lack motivation. You are stuck because your mind learned how to protect you and never learned when to let you go. The prison you're living in doesn't look like fear. It looks like intelligence. You don't realize it at first. That's the most dangerous part. You think awareness is freedom. You think because you can see the problem, name it, explain it, analyze it, that you are already halfway out. But awareness without action doesn't liberate you. It slowly builds the walls of a prison you can't see. At the beginning, awareness feels powerful. You finally understand why you are the way you are. You recognize patterns. You see your fears, your habits, your limitations. You watch yourself from the outside and think, at least now I know. And for a moment, that knowing gives you relief. It feels like progress. It feels like growth. But if nothing changes after that moment, something dangerous happens. The mind starts using awareness as a substitute for movement. You begin to believe that understanding is enough. That insight itself is transformation. That one day somehow clarity will magically turn into courage. But it doesn't. What actually happens is quieter and far more subtle. Each time you see what needs to change and don't act, your mind learns a new rule. Seeing is safe, doing is dangerous. Over time, awareness stops being a light and becomes a cage. You start collecting insights the way some people collect books they never read. You know the language of growth. You can explain why people stay stuck. You can even give advice to others. But when it comes to your own life, you pause. You hesitate, you wait, and every delay reinforces the prison. This is how intelligent people trap themselves. Not through ignorance, but through excessive understanding without movement. The mind becomes skilled at observation and terrible at execution. You tell yourself you're working on it, that you're processing, that you're not ready yet. And because these words sound reasonable, no alarm goes off. No one questions it, not even you. But slowly something inside you hardens. The gap between who you understand yourself to be and how you actually live begins to widen. And that gap creates tension, guilt, quiet frustration, a low-level disappointment that follows you everywhere. You know more than you live, and that contradiction eats at you. At this point, awareness no longer empowers you. It judges you. Every insight becomes another reminder of what you're not doing. Every realization turns into pressure, and instead of motivating you, it exhausts you. So you retreat further into thinking, more analysis, more reflection, more planning. Anything except the one thing that would break the pattern: action. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Awareness without action doesn't make you wise. It makes you stuck with better explanations. The mind starts protecting the status quo by convincing you that you're already evolving internally, that outer change can wait, that timing isn't right, that conditions need to improve first. And because you're intelligent, those excuses are convincing. But life doesn't respond to understanding. Life responds to movement. No amount of insight reshapes your reality until it's expressed through behavior. And every day you delay that expression, the prison strengthens. Not because you're incapable, but because repetition trains the nervous system. You're teaching yourself that insight leads nowhere. This is why people who know so much often feel strangely powerless. They're not lacking potential. They're drowning in unexpressed awareness. They live in a mental world where everything makes sense but nothing changes. And deep down they feel it. That quiet sense of being trapped isn't confusion. It's suppressed action. The mind loves this prison because it feels safe. Thinking has no consequences. Action does. Awareness lets you feel productive without risking failure, rejection, or discomfort. But safety is the currency of stagnation. The moment you choose comfort over movement, awareness turns against you. And here's the turning point most people miss. Freedom doesn't come from more understanding. It comes from acting before you feel ready, before you feel certain, before you feel confident. The prison door doesn't open when you think your way out. It opens when you move despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the incomplete clarity. When you act, something remarkable happens. The mind reorganizes itself around movement. Fear shrinks. Insight deepens. Confidence follows behavior, not the other way around. Action transforms awareness from a cage back into a tool. So if you feel trapped, don't ask yourself what you need to understand next. Ask yourself what you already understand but haven't lived yet. Because the moment awareness turns into action, the prison begins to collapse. At some point, the prison tightens. Not because life becomes harder, but because your inner world becomes louder. This is where overthinking quietly takes control. It doesn't arrive as chaos. It arrives disguised as intelligence, as caution, as responsibility. You tell yourself you're being careful, strategic, thoughtful, but underneath that polished surface, fear is driving the wheel. Overthinking is not deep thinking. It is delayed living. It's the mind looping around the same questions, the same scenarios, the same imagined outcomes, trying to find a version of reality where action comes without risk. And because that version doesn't exist, the loop never ends. The mind keeps searching, revisiting, refining, but never deciding. At first, overthinking feels productive. You're planning, you're preparing, you're getting clear. But clarity becomes a moving target. Every time you get close, the mind introduces a new variable, a new doubt, a new angle to consider. And slowly, decision-making turns into mental paralysis. What's really happening is this. Your mind is trying to protect you from uncertainty. Action always contains the unknown. Once you move, you lose control over outcomes. You might fail. You might be seen. You might be wrong. Overthinking offers an illusion of control. As long as you stay in your head, nothing can hurt you. But nothing can change either. This is why intelligent people struggle here more than others. Their minds are powerful enough to generate endless possibilities. Endless reasons to wait, endless explanations for delay. The same intelligence that could create momentum is used to justify inaction. And because the reasons sound logical, the trap remains invisible. Over time, the cost becomes heavy. You start mistrusting your own decisions. Even small choices feel loaded. You replay conversations that already ended. You imagine futures that never arrive. Your energy drains not because you're doing too much, but because you're carrying too many unfinished mental loops. And here's the cruel part. The more you overthink, the less confident you feel. Confidence is built through movement, through feedback, through experience. But overthinking keeps you frozen, so confidence never has a chance to grow. This reinforces the belief that you're not ready yet, which feeds even more overthinking. The cycle tightens. At some point, your intuition grows quiet, not because it's gone, but because it's been ignored too many times. You've trained yourself to value analysis over inner knowing, to trust logic over instinct. And while logic is useful, it cannot replace lived experience. It can only comment on it. You begin to feel disconnected from yourself. You know what makes sense on paper, but you don't feel aligned. That inner tension shows up as anxiety, restlessness, or a vague dissatisfaction you can't explain. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're mentally overloaded and emotionally underexpressed. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Most of the thinking you're doing right now won't matter once you act. Reality has a way of cutting through mental noise. One real step forward teaches you more than weeks of analysis. One honest attempt gives you feedback no amount of thinking ever could. But the mind resists this truth. It prefers preparation to exposure. It prefers imagining life to entering it. So it convinces you to wait for certainty, for motivation, for confidence, for the perfect moment. And while you wait, life keeps moving without you. The shift happens when you stop asking, "What's the best decision?" and start asking, "What's the next honest step?" Not the perfect step, not the guaranteed one, just the real one. The step that moves you out of your head and into motion. Overthinking collapses the moment action begins. Not all at once, but enough. Each step interrupts the loop. Each decision, however imperfect, weakens the prison walls. You don't need to silence the mind. You need to give it something real to respond to. Because clarity doesn't come before movement. It comes from it. And the moment you move, even slightly, the prison loosens its grip. There is another layer to this prison, and it's more subtle than overthinking. It's the quiet identity you've built around who you believe you are. Not who you could be, not who you were meant to become, but who you have learned to survive as. This identity feels familiar, safe, and reasonable, and that is exactly why it becomes dangerous. At some point in life, usually after a few disappointments, failures, or rejections, the mind makes an unconscious decision. This is how far I go. You don't say it out loud, but you live it. You start defining yourself by what didn't work, by what hurt, by what you once tried and didn't master immediately. Slowly, you stop seeing life as something you actively shape and start seeing it as something that happens to you. This is not weakness. This is adaptation. The psyche is trying to protect you from pain. It creates a smaller version of you that fits inside predictable limits. This version avoids risks, avoids conflict, avoids visibility. It stays within the boundaries of what feels controllable. And because this version has kept you emotionally safe, you begin to confuse it with your true self. The problem is, growth always threatens identity. Every time you consider changing, your mind doesn't ask, "Is this good for me?" It asks, "Is this safe for who I am?" And if the change challenges the current self-image, resistance appears immediately. Doubt, fear, rationalization, delay. The prison doesn't need bars when identity does the locking. You might say you want more confidence, but confidence would require behaving like someone you're not used to being. You might say you want success, but success would force you to outgrow the version of yourself that people are comfortable with. You might say you want freedom, but freedom would remove the excuses that protect you from responsibility. So instead, the mind negotiates. It says not now, later, after, one more preparation. Once, I feel ready, and these delays feel reasonable, even mature. But years pass this way, not dramatically, quietly, slowly, while you stay loyal to an outdated self. This is why people can be intelligent, aware, even self-reflective, and still remain stuck. Insight alone does not break identity. You can understand your patterns perfectly and still repeat them, because the prison is not ignorance. It's attachment. Attachment to being the one who plays it safe. Attachment to being the one who doesn't fail publicly. Attachment to being the one who stays in control. Even attachment to being the one who is still figuring things out. At least that identity doesn't require action. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Part of you benefits from staying here. The prison offers protection from judgment, from disappointment, from the shock of discovering your limits or your potential. As long as you remain smaller than you could be, you never have to face the full weight of who you might become. But this protection comes at a cost. The cost is vitality, meaning, inner respect. Something inside you knows you're living below your capacity. You feel it in moments of silence, in the irritation that comes from watching others move forward, in the heaviness that no amount of comfort can erase. The mind will try to intellectualize this discomfort. It will blame circumstances, timing, other people. But beneath all of that is a quieter realization. You have outgrown the version of yourself you're still loyal to. Breaking this prison doesn't start with becoming someone new. It starts with letting go of who you are clinging to. The self-image that says, "This is just how I am." The story that explains your limitations as permanent traits rather than temporary strategies. You don't need to destroy your identity. You need to loosen it, to see it as a chapter, not a definition, to recognize that who you've been was a response to past conditions, not a life sentence. This shift is uncomfortable because it removes the familiar ground beneath your feet. You won't immediately know who you are replacing the old identity with, and that uncertainty is exactly what the mind fears most. But that uncertainty is also where growth begins. The moment you act in a way that contradicts your old self-image, the prison cracks. One honest risk, one boundary set, one decision made without waiting for internal permission. Each action sends a signal deeper than thought. I am not who I used to be. And that is when the prison loses its authority. Not because the fear disappears, but because it is no longer obeyed. You don't escape this prison by thinking your way out. You walk out by becoming someone. Your old identity can no longer contain another. Wall of this hidden mental prison is built from the illusion of control. The mind convinces you that as long as you are thinking, analyzing, preparing, and planning, you are in control of your life. It feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels safer than acting. But this sense of control is deceptive. What it really does is keep you motionless while giving you the comfort of activity. You replay conversations in your head, imagining what you should have said. You rehearse future scenarios, preparing responses for events that may never happen. You weigh every possible outcome until no outcome feels worth choosing. And in doing so, you avoid the one thing that would actually give you real power: decisive movement. The mind would rather stay busy than be exposed. Because action always carries uncertainty, and uncertainty threatens the illusion of control. This is why you can feel exhausted without having done anything meaningful. Mental effort replaces lived experience. You mistake thought for progress, but nothing changes. The same patterns repeat. The same frustrations return. And deep down, you know it's not because you lack understanding. It's because you're avoiding the risk of stepping into the unknown. The mind fears uncertainty more than pain. Pain is familiar. You can explain it. You can adapt to it. Uncertainty, however, strips the mind of its authority. It forces you into the present moment where outcomes cannot be predicted. And so the mind creates endless reasons to delay. It says you need more clarity, more confidence, more time. But clarity is not something you find before action. It is something that forms through action. This prison is strengthened every time you wait to feel ready. Readiness becomes a condition that is never met, because the mind defines it as the absence of fear. And fear is not a sign that you are unprepared, it is a sign that you are about to grow. The irony is that the very sensations you are trying to eliminate are the proof that you are moving beyond the limits of who you've been. You may believe that once you understand yourself better, once you fix your inner conflicts, once you feel more certain, then you will move. But the truth works in the opposite direction. Movement resolves inner conflict. Action clarifies identity. Experience creates certainty. Waiting does none of these things. So the prison convinces you to stay inside your head, where everything feels manageable. You can simulate courage without risking rejection. You can imagine success without risking failure. You can feel morally superior for working on yourself, while never confronting the moment that actually demands change. And this is how years pass, quietly, respectably, without obvious collapse. From the outside, your life looks stable, but inside something stagnates. The sense of being alive dulls. You feel disconnected from your own potential, like you're watching life rather than participating in it. The mind will argue that caution is wisdom. Sometimes it is. But when caution becomes chronic, it turns into self-betrayal. Wisdom is not the avoidance of risk. It is the ability to act in spite of uncertainty. A life without uncertainty is not a life. It's a carefully maintained routine. At some point, you must recognize that the cost of staying the same has become greater than the cost of change. The familiar discomfort you've learned to tolerate begins to outweigh the fear of the unknown. This is not a dramatic moment. It's quiet, almost disappointing. A simple realization that you cannot think your way into a different life. Freedom does not come from eliminating fear. It comes from deciding that fear no longer gets the final say. When you act while uncertain, you reclaim authority from the mind. You stop asking for permission from thoughts that exist only to protect the past. And in that moment, the prison weakens because it was never built to withstand action. There is a deeper, quieter mechanism holding this prison together, and it is the habit of self-betrayal disguised as self-protection, not the dramatic kind, not the obvious moments where you abandon your values in public ways, but the small daily betrayals that feel reasonable, justified, even mature. The moments where you silence your own impulse, dismiss your intuition, and override what you know you should do, because doing it would be uncomfortable. Every time you feel the urge to speak honestly and you don't, a line is drawn. Every time you feel the pull to act boldly and you choose safety instead, another line appears. Over time, these lines become walls. You begin to lose trust in yourself, not consciously but internally. And when self-trust erodes, motivation collapses. You stop believing that your actions matter, because your experience has taught you that you won't follow through anyway. The mind is clever in how it frames this. It doesn't call it betrayal. It calls it being realistic, being patient, being considerate. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right moment, protecting relationships, avoiding unnecessary conflict. And sometimes those explanations are true, but often they are convenient masks for fear. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of discovering that you are capable of more and therefore responsible for more. This is how the prison becomes internalized. No external force is holding you back. No single decision ruined your life. Instead, a pattern formed, a pattern of knowing and not acting, and the psyche keeps score. Each unacted truth becomes heavier. Each delayed decision adds to a quiet sense of shame. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the dull weight of unrealized potential. This shame doesn't motivate you. It drains you. It makes you hesitate even more, because acting now would mean confronting all the times you didn't act before. So the mind protects you again by encouraging distraction, busyness, and endless improvement without execution. You stay in progress forever, because finishing would expose the gap between who you are and who you could have been. You might notice this when you set goals and quickly abandon them, or when you feel inspired by ideas but resistant to commitment. Inspiration feels good because it promises change without requiring it. Commitment feels heavy because it demands consistency. And consistency would force you to face yourself. The tragedy is not that you fail. Failure is honest. Failure teaches. The tragedy is that you don't fully try, that you live in a space of almost someday and maybe. This half-engaged existence dulls your sense of purpose. Life feels flat, repetitive, and strangely exhausting, even when nothing particularly bad is happening. Your inner world knows the truth. It knows which conversations you're avoiding, which choices you're postponing, which paths you secretly want to take but are afraid to admit out loud. And every time you turn away from that knowing, you strengthen the prison, not because you are weak, but because you are human. And humans avoid pain unless they consciously choose otherwise. Breaking this pattern doesn't require dramatic transformation. It requires integrity at the smallest level. Doing one thing you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it. Speaking one truth you've been swallowing. Choosing one uncomfortable action instead of the familiar excuse. These moments rebuild self-trust. And self-trust is the real foundation of freedom. When you begin to trust yourself again, energy returns. Motivation reappears, not as hype but as quiet momentum. You stop negotiating with your own intentions. You stop needing external validation to move. And slowly the prison loses its grip. Not because the fear is gone, but because your word to yourself finally means something again. Freedom begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. At some point, the question is no longer why you are stuck, but how long you are willing to stay there once you can see the pattern clearly. Awareness changes the rules. Once you recognize the walls as internal, not external, you lose the comfort of blaming circumstances. And this is where the final barrier appears, not fear, not doubt, but responsibility. Responsibility is heavier than fear because fear allows you to wait. Responsibility demands movement. The mind resists this by pretending that clarity should arrive before action, that confidence must come first, that certainty is a prerequisite for change. But certainty is not the door out of the prison. It is the reward for stepping through it. Action comes first. Clarity follows. Most intelligent people believe they are thinking their way toward freedom, when in reality they are thinking their way around it. They analyze options endlessly, trying to choose the perfect path, unaware that the act of choosing imperfectly is what builds inner strength. The psyche does not grow through contemplation alone. It grows through consequence. Without consequence, there is no transformation, only ideas circling in a closed system.